What's up, guys? Swift here. This video has been in the works for a long time, and I've actually updated my rankings frequently over the last 6 weeks, getting a chance to see all of these guys play at least twice. Today, I'm covering my early edge rusher rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft. Let's go ahead and get right into it. I think next year's class could have as many as 5 to 7 edge rushers taken in the first round, and then a bunch more guys who could go on day 2 of the draft as well. In 2023, I called it the year of the wide receiver, and as much as I love Jared Verse and some of the edge rushers in this year's draft, I said next year is the year of the edge rusher, and 2025 is still shaping out to look that way. Even though a couple of the top prospects have gotten off to slow starts, next year's class of pass rushers is absolutely loaded. It's still early, but right now there are more than 15 guys who could go on the first couple of days of next year's draft. The class is so loaded that a couple of these guys might even choose to stay in school for another year just to avoid getting lost in the bunch. I've also been scouting the offensive line a lot for next year's draft as well, so I have a ton of videos coming on those positions, but I started scouting edge rushers way before this season even started. I don't want to focus too much on where these guys are ranked right now because I've flip-flopped them around countless times already, but the biggest thing to focus on right now for me is how much talent there is across the board. I'll talk a bit about each guy and why I have them ranked where I do. First up is Texas A&M's Nick Scourton. He's been high on my list for a long time, but the reason he's ahead of the other three today is his size. He's 6'4", 285 with long arms and a ton of athleticism. He fits everything Eberflus looks for in a pass rusher. He also has a relentless motor that would fit the Hits philosophy. On top of that, Scourton is awesome at setting the edge and playing the run as well. He had 8 sacks last year at Purdue before transferring to Texas A&M, but he also had an awesome 42 pressures. On top of that, he had the third most run stops in the Power 5 with 25 total, showing off his versatility against both the run and the pass. Right now, Scourton would probably be the perfect guy to line up across from Montez Sweat. He fits everything that Poles and Eberflus look for in a defensive end. At number 2, I have Abdul Carter from Penn State, who was behind Chop Robinson and Adiza Isaac the last couple of years. He was actually playing off-ball linebacker and still was able to stand out a lot on tape early in his career. But now with those two moving on to the NFL, both he and the guy who's number 12 on my list, Danny Dennis Sutton, have taken over as Penn State's new edge rushers. Last year as a linebacker, he still had 27 pressures and 4 sacks. Carter is a freak athlete who was on Feldman's freaks list. This guy ran a 4.48 at 6'3", 250 pounds. He's probably the most explosive defensive lineman I've seen in a while. Honestly, this guy has some Micah Parsons in him, wearing the same number and even moving around the defense similar to what Parsons does in Dallas. Watch out for Abdul Carter. I love this dude. And then next up is James Pierce Jr., who coming into the season I had ranked at number 1. He hasn't really done anything to lose his spot yet. He has gotten off to a slow start this season. To me, it was just more about Nick Scourton being a better fit for Eberflus. Pierce is a bit undersized at 242 pounds, but he has elite burst off the line of scrimmage and the ability to bend around the edge. He is a guy with 10+ sack upside early in his career. His biggest concern would be his ability to set the edge and hold up against the run in the NFL. But he does offer the upside to develop into that kind of player. He's a lock to go in the first round if you ask me. Next up is Mykel Williams from Georgia. He's right there as well. He's a bit bigger than the last two guys, coming in at 6'5", 265, but he has struggled a bit this year. He has everything you look for in an edge rusher, though: size, speed, athleticism, and power, but his technique is still very raw, and he's a guy who's going to need to be coached up in the NFL. And then we get to Jack Sawyer. Sawyer has looked like the next coming of one of the Bosa brothers since he arrived on the campus at Ohio State. Sawyer has 14 sacks through his first 3 years, and this year he added 2.5 with a forced fumble. He's a guy who has all of the tools of a top 5 pick. As long as he can put it together down the stretch and have a big combine, he could honestly get drafted that high. Will it happen? That remains to be seen. But this is where the list gets really deep. Even after the top five, I still have two more guys with first round grades. Both Ole Miss's Princely Umanamileyan and Oregon's Jordan Birch. I'm really high on both of these players as well. Princely transferred from Florida. He was Gervon Dexter's teammate. He has elite first step quickness and is a guy to definitely keep an eye on. But then Jordan Birch is a monster. 6'6", 295 pounds. He could honestly play anywhere on the defensive line, and I just have such a hard time ranking this guy. He's an absolute freak of an athlete and was clocked running at 21 miles per hour, faster than some receivers in the NFL, and he's 6'6", 295 pounds. If you haven't seen Jordan Birch play yet, watch the Ohio State versus Oregon game tonight. Birch gets to go against probably the best offensive line in the nation. It should be awesome to watch. But that's 7 players I have with first round grades right now. But then after that, Boston College's edge rusher has a second round grade. So does JT Tuimoloau, LT Overton, and even Savion Jones from LSU. I initially planned on narrowing this down to 15, but I had a total of 18 edge rushers that I still believe have the potential right now to get drafted on day 2 next year. So I at least wanted to list everyone on the screen. You have Danny Dennis Sutton, Ashton Gillette, Elijah Roberts, Kamen Rucker, Ethan Burke, Landon Jackson, and Ahmad Hassanain. The 2025 edge rusher class is just uniquely talented and absolutely stacked with talent. And while I don't know if defensive end will be as big of a need as I initially thought it would, next year's draft still offers the opportunity to add an edge rusher at some point in the first 3 rounds. We can still draft offensive line. Remember, we have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, so I honestly expect one of them to go to the defensive line. Most likely an edge rusher, but it could end up being a defensive tackle, especially if Darrell Taylor and Austin Booker continue developing, or maybe we even get something from Jacob Martin. Ryan Poles could re-sign Darrell Taylor or Jacob Martin for next year as well. But from the outside looking in, with how much talent there is on the defensive line, it almost makes too much sense to add another pass rusher next year in this draft. It's the year of the edge rusher, and there are so many talented players on the defensive line, not just at defensive end, but also a lot of really talented guys at defensive tackle as well. So I think next year Ryan Poles is going to focus heavily on the trenches. He should invest heavily in both the offensive and defensive lines, which will go a long way in making this team better and helping us go on a championship run. Let me know what you guys think. Who is your favorite edge rusher? Which guys are you watching? Let me know in the comments. Please remember to hit that like button for me. Stay tuned. And until next time, bear down.